I forgot my grandson disconnected my microphone, so I was I got to redo it now. How is everybody? Are you half awake? Mostly awake? Well, we'll take care of that right now. So years ago, I sang at our graduation, and we sang Through the Years. Do you remember Through the Years? Through the years. And so the girl I was singing with, Laura Eckelbarger, said to me, Eric, I want you to do the introduction before we sing. So I said, I want to thank our parents who have loved us until now. That was my introduction. So anyway, and I wondered why everybody laughed. I didn't get it. So today we're going to talk about how Christ changes how we live, and then we're going to talk about why we don't need to live in shame. And I came up with, I got some help, but I came up with 8 ways you can tell if a friend of yours or if you struggle with shame. And so let me give you the top 8, and then you can decide. By the way, we all sometimes struggle with shame, and I can tell you there was a time in my life where I struggled with shame a lot more than I do today. I should say the wrong version of shame. And we're going to talk about, a little bit later, I'll talk about the difference between conviction and condemnation and how that shame can play into that idea of condemnation, how the enemy used that. All right, so here's some things. Number 1, someone who struggles with shame often takes correction as rejection. Number 2, someone who struggles with shame may get defensive very quickly. Someone who struggles with shame may pull away from people who are actually trying to help. Number 4, they often assume others are disappointed in them. Number 5, they may hide their struggles instead of asking for help. And I have a little caveat for that, unless they're a man, because then they were just told you're not supposed to tell anybody you have a fine. How are you? Fine. Right? Well, that's weird. My phone's misbehaving. Number 6, they may have trouble receiving encouragement or grace. So if you tell them, hey, you did a great job, they look at you and go, or whatever, or make some excuse for not doing that. They may resist accountability because honesty feels dangerous. And then last but not least, they may actually push people away, even when what they really need is love. And the reason they push people away is they want to reject people before they get rejected, because then it's kind of under their control. So that's a whole shame cycle. And here's the thing. If you find yourself, if you listen to that list and you were like 7, and you're like, wait a second, I do all those things. I mean, there's several books on shame, but one of the things I would tell you is there's a book called Boundaries by Cloud, and here's what Boundaries talks about. Boundaries talks about sometimes we have to figure out what is my responsibility and who am I, what are my boundaries and what are your boundaries, and not letting other people tell you how to do. And by the way, one of the big things I learned about boundaries was sometimes I just have to let people feel how they feel. Did you hear me? I'm not responsible to make everybody happy. I know that's a shocker, because I know on Sundays you leave and you're the happiest person in the world. But the truth is, I'm not responsible for making everyone happy. And what's funny is a little thing that I heard years ago was, if you're responsible for making everybody happy, you're a clown. And I can tell you that the opposite of that is true, because I know some people. I had a girl in my college group, and we had a clown group at the church, and when the clowns would come in, she would get up and run out of the building because clowns terrified her. So there it is. So even clowns can't get away with it. So I thought it was funny because like a week and a half ago, I did a little minute-long video on fire alarms, and I talked about fear and fire alarms. So my fire alarms overheard that video and decided at 2 o'clock in the morning that one of them would start to beep. Now, I didn't mind the fire alarm, but the problem is I also have a Yorkie. And my Yorkie believes that beep, beep in the middle of the night is someone trying to kill me. And since I'm my Yorkie's favorite person, my Yorkie is going to make sure that doesn't happen by waking up everyone in the house to make sure that whatever that threat is taken care of. So beep, beep, and of course, That's the manliest the dog's bark gets, but that's... And so little Buster wants to run around the house, barking at every noise. So I, of course, do what you do when your fire alarm goes off. I walk out into the living room in the middle of the night when you're half awake and try to figure out where the beep came from. And of course, you hear 5 minutes later, beep, beep, and you're like, okay, the battery's low. Get a chair, get a ladder, whatever you got to get. Drag it over and do what now if you're a fireman, you're going to have to forgive me for what I'm about to say. Because I don't have batteries to replace in the middle of the night. So I just disconnect the fire alarm. That's not going to beep anymore. Don't worry, Buster. I got him. Right? Go back to bed. Beep, beep. That sounded like Dino. That was pretty good. It sounded like Dino from the Flintstones. Okay, so I go out. So then once again, half asleep, standing in the living room, trying to discern which way the beep is coming from. Beep, beep. I think it's that way. So then I go over there, disconnect that one. You know what's going to happen next, don't you? Lay back down. By the way, they wait. I'm telling you, I think the fire alarm's like, wait till he gets asleep. Don't beep now. Give him a couple minutes. And you just, and about the time you do that, beep, beep, and you just start disconnecting everything. You think a fire is better than this at this point, right? If there's a fireman here, I just want to apologize to you and say that none of what I just said is true, and I hope you'll all change your batteries today. I hope that makes up for my neglect of fire things. So I changed out all the batteries, and I had to order batteries because I only had so many batteries, and 9 volt's a weird thing now, and they charge you like $7 a battery now or something. And, oh, the light's still on in this one. This might go off during church, just so you know. And I don't know how to turn this one off. So one of the things, I was changing batteries out, and I went into my mom's room, and I looked at her fire alarm. It doesn't match any other fire alarms we have, which, by the way, that's not good. They're supposed to all match when you have a system that's connected. And I know I've never changed the battery in this thing. And I'm like, we're going to replace that. So I ordered a new one, and I'm going to put it in today and all that stuff. But as I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, these fire alarms, how does this work? And here's the deal. Let me tell you about shame and fire alarms. And fear's the same way. But here's how shame works. Shame tells you something that's not true. And the problem with shame telling you something that's not true is, number one, it can do that with people. And so you'll think people hate you that don't hate you. You won't be able to respond to people because you instantly get offended, or you get your feelings hurt, or anybody even tries to correct you. You take it the wrong way and you overreact, and you reject people over and over in your life because you don't have anybody. That's the danger. But here's the bigger danger. You can do it with God too. And it's the very first thing that Adam and Eve did when they blew it, when they messed up. They ran and hid, or I should say, tried to hide from God. And I love that in Genesis when God says, where are you? There's people who actually think he didn't know. And I'm like, okay, he created the whole universe. I think a couple of bushes weren't keeping him from noticing where they were. Here's the truth. When God asks you a question, it's not because he doesn't know the answer. He wants you to know where you are. And so here's the thing. What shame does is the same thing to us. We not only run from people and push everybody away, and even the people we love and care about in our lives, but we push God away. And that's the bigger danger of this idea of shame. And 1 John chapter 2, talking about assurance, and all of 1 John really is about assurance, is recognizing that Jesus took care of that for us. So let's pick up in there and start with number 1. Jesus takes care of our sin problem. So you don't have to run from him. He's the one defending you. He's the one fighting for you. Here's what it says. My dear children, by the way, I love John calling us dear children because he's probably around 80 years old. We're not exactly sure when this was written, but he's older now. And so 80, by the way, in biblical times, super old. That would be like somebody being like 110 today. It would be like if you saw somebody 110, you'd be like, whoa! And that's how they were with John. And even one of his disciples named Polycarp preach some of these exact same things. Here we go. I write this to you so that you will not sin. So he basically says you can, because you become a Christian, you got righteousness in you, you're not forced to wake up in the morning and automatically sin. And then he says, but if anybody does sin, does that include anybody in this room? Anybody? Anybody, right? If anybody does sin, we have an advocate. An advocate, that's somebody who fights for us. Did you ever realize that not only is Jesus for you, he's fighting for you, and then it continues, with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. He is the atoning sacrifice. So not only is he fighting for you, he takes your place. There's a big word called I can't even say it this morning. Propitiation. There's a big word that basically means he transfers your sin to him. He takes it. He pays your fine. He pays your debt. It says he does this for our sins, and not only for ours, also the sins of the whole world. But let me tell you how the enemy works. The enemy wants you to feel condemned. That's with other people and with God. And let me tell you the difference between condemnation and conviction. Condemnation is usually very general, and there's nothing specific you can do about it. Condemnation sounds like this. Eric, you hit your antenna with the weed eater, and I couldn't say this word with the kids in here. You are such an idiot. And by the way, if you're like me, you actually say that word out loud to yourself. Anybody else do that? You yell at yourself? Anybody, right? Why? And I'll tell you why. My mom's going to watch this and I'm going to be in trouble, but it's too bad. But because when I was a kid, I worked for my dad. I was 8 years old, barrel of concrete, probably 150 pounds of concrete, walking with a wheelbarrow, slipped, dropped the concrete, got yelled at. 8 years old. Think I figured out, oh, you're an idiot, Eric, right? So you see where that comes from? Some of you had the same experience, maybe worse. And if you've been abused, that's part of the deal. In that is this shame cycle. And shame basically says, you're not good enough. And when you start to feel that way, it messes with how you treat other people. Because when you're feeling inferior to other people, you become very defensive. By the way, sometimes people who have a lot of shame actually try to project that they're the strongest. Why would they do that? Because it's a facade to protect themselves from feeling shame. So that's condemnation says, you're not good enough. You're a failure. You're a terrible dad. You're a terrible mom. You're a terrible person. You are terrible at this. You're terrible at that. It's a non-specific condemnation. Conviction is specific. So something happens, let's say you're somewhere and you yell at somebody, God forbid, but let's just say you're somewhere and you yell at somebody. Conviction is, hey, Eric, you need to go back to so-and-so and say you're sorry for the way you acted because you're a jerk, or whatever. By the way, we sometimes try to make light of our apologies, right? We make an excuse for ourselves. When you apologize to people, don't make an excuse. Just say, I'm sorry, I acted like an idiot. Don't say I took too much medicine or whatever excuse you want to use. Just apologize. But put it out there. Why? Because it's not out of shame or guilt. Conviction is so that you can grow. And so you learn from your failures. Condemnation, you don't learn from your failures. Why? Because condemnation tells you you'll never overcome. You're always this way. This is what you always do. You hear how that sounds? So pay attention to that when you hear those things. Don't mix them up. Listen to what it says in Hebrews chapter 4. This is good news. Therefore, since we have a high priest who's ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we don't have a high priest who's unable to empathize with our weaknesses, But we have one who's been tempted in every way, just as we have, and yet he didn't sin. Let us then approach God's, listen to these words, God's throne of grace with confidence. And the truth is, a lot of us feel like God has a throne of judgment for us. But that's not what the Bible says. It says, as a Christian, when you've surrendered your life to Jesus, when you approach God's throne, it's the throne of grace. Grace says you don't deserve this love and acceptance, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. And then it continues with confidence. That's crazy. Why? So we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. Let me tell you what mercy and grace look like. I had in-ear headphones. I was taking my nephew to look at some things, and when I was with him, I had my headphones in, I took one out, and I lost it. And I could not find it anywhere. So I wrote the company who made the headphones, and I said, is there any way I can buy one headphone? Basically, I'm a doofus, and I lost one headphone. So you see the condemnation there? All right. So, and I lost a headphone, and I'm really sorry. The person on the phone said, let me see what I can do. I'll send you an email. No email, no email. So I'm getting irritated. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to have to buy another pair. Overnight shipping. In the mail comes a little box, and I'm like, oh, this must be my headphone. Maybe they sent me a headphone, and they're sending me a bill. I open it. There's an entire set of headphones. Whole new set. They said, we're replacing and giving you these headphones because you lost one. I wanted to say, wait, you don't understand. I wanted to argue with him. I'm the one who lost it. You didn't lose it. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who blew it. I'm the one who messed up. You can't reward me. That's the definition of grace. Totally undeserved. Totally. I felt like a total failure. Oh, I lost a headphone. I mean, goodness gracious, who does that? Me. By the way, my wife will tell you we've got to track everything because I lose everything. This is a long story. All right. So here's the thing. Here's your first question. Do I confess my failures and walk in mercy and grace? So here's kind of the weird thing that happens when you struggle with shame. When you struggle with shame, you try to hide your imperfections from others because you already feel like they're judging you. So you don't want to be honest with them. You don't want to tell them that you're struggling. You don't want to tell them you have struggle. By the way, this is one of the best things about AA and NA and all those groups is that people sit around and will say to each other, I'm messed up. And somebody else will go, me too. And all of a sudden you realize, oh, everybody's messed up? Yeah. And you don't have to walk in shame. Why? Because Jesus is your advocate. He's the one fighting on your behalf, and you don't have to hide it, and you don't have to be fake, and you don't have to pretend you have your act together. We all lose a headphone now and then. Number 2, loving Jesus changes what we do. I hate this watch this week. I told it, I hate you. Here's why I hate it. I went to the heart doctor. Heart doctor looks at me. Says, Eric, your numbers are a little up. How much are you walking? I said, I don't know. He looks at my wrist and says, find out. I didn't like that answer. No idea is what I wanted to say. What happened? I could look and track what I was doing and actually know how I'm doing. Am I being faithful to that? The Bible does that with your relationship with God. You want to know how your relationship with God is? Here it is. These are the things. Do you really love Him? Here we go. We know that we have come to know Him, growing in our relationship with Him, if we keep His commands. Whoever says, I know Him, but does not do what He commands is a liar. Can you imagine an old man calling you a liar? Liar. And the truth is not in that person. But if anyone, listen, obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him, that's the word for abide, must live as Jesus did. Now, here's the deal. If you're a shame person, you just took that verse and went, well, I'm a failure. So there's your first test for shame today. But here's what's awesome about this verse is he's saying if you hang around Jesus, you're going to pick up the fragrance of Jesus. It's going to be reflected in what you do. And let me tell you, I used to clean Peter Lord's prayer office. And one of the things, when I would clean his office, he must have drank 5 million cups of coffee in that office and spilled it everywhere. Because I would clean that office, and you walk in there, and it's like 12 Starbucks. It was like if you could concentrate the smell of coffee and launch it into a room, that room was it. And I literally would leave that room after cleaning it, and all day long I would smell coffee. I would smell coffee on my shirt. I'd smell coffee in my head. It was great. I loved the smell of coffee, so that was not a bad thing. Now here's the thing. If you hang around Jesus, if you spend time in his word, if you spend time in prayer, not just telling God what you want, but allowing him to speak into your life, the fragrance of Jesus will begin to rub off on you. And you'll begin to see areas of your life that used to be such a hard struggle. God begins to work on those. People that you were unable to love before, you're able to be more loving. Things that you used to not be convicted about or care about, you all of a sudden go, oh, I got to work on that. Oh. And that's what happens when you hang around Jesus. As you know him, it changes your behavior. Listen to what it says here. Jesus says, Matthew 7. And he's talking about the false prophets here, but this applies to fruit. Listen to this. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree can't bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. And here's the long and short of that is, are you more loving this year than you were last year? Are you more forgiving this year than you were last year? If not, then maybe you need to hang around Jesus a little more. If not, by the way, and here's how it works. You get to know him in his word, and then you learn to love him more. You learn to know what he wants. So here's your second one. Is loving Christ evident by my obedience? And by the way, one of the things that happens as you spend time in his word, you start to know what God sounds like. Kristen said last week she was teaching my grandson a reading book, so ABCs, right? So A was apple. So she says apple, and Sammy looks at her and he goes, apple. And she says B is boat, and he goes, boat. And she says C is cat, and he goes, meow, meow. Now, I knew instantly that was a Sammy story because here's why. My son calls his cat meow meow. I have no idea why. I'm not responsible for names of my grandcats. Is that what they are? Grandcats? Is that close enough? But I knew it was a Sammy thing. Why? Because I know that's what he says when he sees a cat. He says meow meow. And here's the thing. When you get to know Jesus, when you spend time in his word, when somebody says something, you can say, gosh, that doesn't sound like Jesus. When somebody's living their life in a certain way, you can say, that doesn't look like Jesus. And by the way, sometimes that person's in the mirror. Eric, that doesn't look, you don't drive like Jesus. That's because he had to walk everywhere. No, I didn't say that. Sorry. Never use sarcasm with God. Okay. Now, I want to talk about the hard thing, about forgiving. Rick Warren says it this way: forgiveness must be immediate whether or not a person asks for it. Now, here's the difference, and I want you to hear this. Trust must be rebuilt over time. Trust requires a track record. Don't mix up forgiveness and trust. They're two separate things. You can forgive somebody instantly, but it doesn't mean you have to trust them instantly. Number 3, love and forgiveness brings light. Anyone who claims to be in light but hates his brother or sister is still in darkness right now. But unforgiveness will destroy your life. And I've seen unforgiveness destroy the very people who are mad at somebody else, who won't forgive the other person, and they're not hurting the other person. They're only hurting themselves by walking in hatred and anger and unforgiveness. Now listen, don't hear me wrong. Unforgiveness is not saying what somebody did was okay. It's not lessening what they did. It's not saying, oh, that's not a big deal. It can be a horrible thing. But you still choose to forgive. Why? Because Jesus forgave you. Listen to this next verse. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves. So these are the things you're supposed to put on. By the way, putting on requires some work. Put on compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other. By the way, that word for bear with is not putting up with. It's lifting others up. So you understand if somebody's struggling with shame, you're going to do your best to show them, I really do love them. They may not hear it. That's not your responsibility, but you can say, hey, I really do love and care about you. No, you don't. You hate me because you didn't let me do whatever I wanted when I wanted to do it. If you've had teenagers, by the way, you've heard that exact speech in your house. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And then it says, over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. So here's the final question. Is there anyone that I need to love or forgive? And this just happened to me 2 months ago, and I had no idea. My friend Brad, we're at lunch one day, and I was just asking him questions. We were just talking, catching up. And we've been friends forever, since junior high. That's a long time ago. Van Halen was popular. Okay. So we're talking, and he says, you know, I had to forgive you for stealing my girlfriend. To which I said, what? I stole your girlfriend? He's like, yeah, I was getting ready to move. You were at my birthday party. I walked out of the room, and I came in, and you had asked her to go out on a date, and she said yes. I said, Brad, I don't remember any of that. He's like, it's all right. I forgave you a long time ago. I'm like, so of course I go home going, what an idiot I was. And now I'm mad at me. I'm thinking, how in the world could I do that to my friend? Oh my gosh, I woke up in the middle of the night. Oh, Eric, you doofus, what did you do? Now, I wasn't smart enough to say, but she said yes. Okay. So I'm condemning myself, I'm attacking myself, and you know what I had to do? Lord, I receive your forgiveness. Even for being an idiot sometimes, I receive your forgiveness. Lord, thank you that you forgave me. And Lord, help me to love people. Help me to notice. Help me to pay attention. Lord, help me not to just think of myself and my needs and my stuff. And so sometimes when you deal with something, yeah, you can struggle with unforgiveness, but it's not always towards somebody else. Sometimes the person you need to forgive is in the mirror. They took a weed eater to your antenna in the yard and broke everything. Or wrecked your car. Or whatever they did, and you can choose to forgive. When Jesus removes your guilt, you can quit hiding. When he leads your life, you can start obeying. And when he fills your heart, you can love. So if you struggle with shame and guilt, you're going to struggle with relationships. But when you begin to say, Jesus paid it all, Lord, help me to love more. Help me to care more. Help me to grow more, you will. If you're here today and you want to give your life to Christ, I'll be here after the service. I'd love to talk to you about what it means to be a Christian. We're going to have our time of giving in just a minute. We'll have a song to close our service. You give what God's put on your heart today. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for this time this morning. I thank you for your love for us. Lord, I thank you that Even while we were still sinners, your word says you died for us. You gave everything for us, even when we mess up, and you love us. So, Lord, help us to forgive others. Help us to forgive ourselves. But, Lord, most of all, help us to receive your forgiveness for our failures and our sins. Lord, I pray today if someone needs to trust you, that today would be the day that they surrender their life to you, knowing that you died on a cross to pay for their sins, that you took our place. Lord, thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.